And it's a real pleasure and deep honor to be part of this panel. This has been a passion project for me over the last couple of years, a deep learning and a deep unlearning, and really my biggest growth over the last couple of years, and my most impactful kind of interesting conversations with colleagues. So what we've been leading is an initiative that we have different names for, but here we're calling it Embedding Anti-Racism, Environmental Justice, and Sustainability Science into Civil Engineering Education. And where I'm coming from in this is from my social location that I wanted to start with and acknowledge that I'm a white male settler academic, and I have many unearned privileges. And I live as an uninvited guest on Coast Salish territory. And in the background here is actually my family, my settler grandfather, and my father's the third kid from the left-hand side there. And I grew up with the kind of story of a very humble origin, and only recently have kind of been able to unpack that and unlearn that to kind of better and more deeply understand all the privileges I grew up with and still hold today. So with that, I just want to kind of bring my own kind of learner's mind and beginner's mind to this conversation. I'm still learning and trying to bring humility to all of these conversations. And so I'm always open for feedback, suggestions, and how to do better and how to learn more. The conversation today and what I'm going to present is all organized with this slide about lessons learned from what we've been doing in civil engineering over the last couple of years. So I want you to ask, and unfortunately this is a GIF, and this was supposed to be a cute cat asking this question, did it work? I want you to ask this in your mind as I speak. Do you think this worked? How could I learn from this initiative, and what could I take to my department or my initiatives, or however I'm applying anti-racism initiatives across UVic? So for each of these are things that we did in our initiative. And I'm going to talk about each of these over the next 10 or 15 minutes. So we hired, using preferential hires, research assistants. We assembled a diverse team and with leading advisors. And we spent quite a bit of effort in clarifying why this initiative is important and mapping curriculum to show the potential of this initiative within our department. Throughout the whole effort, we kept this very grassroots and voluntary and supported. So we had real people actually helping people in their curriculum development. And meanwhile, staying at a high level in developing program, so whole undergrad program learning objectives that is consistent with this new content. And because we're a professional degree in engineering, we do accreditation. And so we are now linking this with our accreditation process and sharing the content and process broadly. So first, we assembled a really amazing team of kind of people, worker bees, who are really working in detail. I held LTSI anti-racism grant, through which I hired two undergrad students one undergrad student from Indigenous Studies and another from law. And then the top line of this is these slides were developed by. So these are the team of people that were meeting once a week for over a whole series of months to work in detail and learn from each other first, and then assemble content and work through content. And then below that, I was interacting with and supported by a diverse team of advisors, both on campus here and off campus. So collectively, this group of people that I want to just really elevate and acknowledge in all of this work represented people from 6 different institutions and 4 different departments at UVic. So a really broad team. And I won't go through everyone's profile, but we're assembling a website, and these people will be more deeply acknowledged and named and described there. So I always say to students, you always have to ask me why. So I'm going to try to answer over the next few slides why I thought this was important to our department and for our students. So first of all, who we are as a civil engineering department is that we're hoping, and we in many ways are, Canada's greenest civil engineering department. We try to address the most pressing global and environmental and sustainability challenges by working for and with a diversity of people on the diverse technologies that build society. So the two core themes within our department is civil engineering for and with people, and green civil engineering. So especially in this theme of civil engineering for and with people, we realized we need and want to elevate our skills around anti-racism and deepen our understanding and practices of environmental justice and how that affects the other theme of green civil engineering. So the vision that we developed for this initiative is to include anti-racism, EDI, and environmental justice across our whole curriculum, integrated across our whole curriculum, and make this so that our accreditation process, this engineering accreditation process, is much less tedious and more robust. Before we started the initiative, these topics were really introduced in a very piecemeal way across our curriculum, in some in some courses, but not many and not consistently. And accreditation was finicky and tedious. Because we are civil engineers, I thought I'd bring in a bridge metaphor here, which has been useful for explaining why I think this is important to colleagues and to students. So we consider that environmental justice, anti-racism, and EDI are important concepts for engineers because of with a bridge being on a foundation of engineering ethics, and I'll explain that in a minute, as well as two aspects of what we are as professional engineers. First, on the left-hand side, a technical practice pillar, so the kind of technical analysis and engineering skills that we use, as well as on the right-hand side, what I call a professional practice pillar, and who we are as professionals. So first of all, this foundation of engineering ethics is when you reread our code of ethics, which is the most fundamental document for any engineer, it is consistent with environmental justice. Many of the words and concepts can be reinterpreted through this more modern lens of environmental justice. More recently, an Engineers Canada report has come out that is also consistent with environmental justice. I'll just read part of this quote here, that engineers are required to take a wider perspective, including goals such as poverty alleviation, social justice, and local and global connections. These are related to the environmental impact of engineering projects on traditional and cultural values, including First Nations. And part of my learning and unlearning was really acknowledging in this technical practice pillar that racism is crucial to consider in technical engineering practice. So I work in water resources engineering, and environmental racism, the first photo on the left-hand side, is now kind of well known and well documented that environmental racism impacts environmental policy, water resources, and environmental engineering. The photo here is of a First Nations reservation in Southern Ontario, but which is located right beside the largest petrochemical factories in Canada. This is just one of many examples of environmental racism in Canada. Racism has also shaped public transit, and transportation is a big part of civil engineering. And urban planning and housing development is often shaped by racist housing rules. Many of us have heard about the problems and challenges of housing on Indigenous lands and on reserve. So explicitly acknowledging the role of racism in technical engineering practice is very important, in my opinion. I also wanted to acknowledge that there's a broad effort to improve our professional practices in engineering to include equity and anti-racism. So the same professional body has just recently put out a professional practices guideline for equity, diversity, and inclusion, which encourages training and other practices, including cultural intelligence, cultural acumen training, and anti-racism training. So all of those things together are why this is important. And what we started with in our practice is mapping our whole curriculum. So This is a map before we started our initiative, with the bright purple being courses with content and the light purple being the courses with potential content. And you can see it's very disparate across our curriculum before we started. So we started asking professors this question on the slide: how could your course help build a student's practice of EDI, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion, environmental justice, and anti-racism? So this is really trying to go down right at the course level. I'm not going to go through each of these individual courses, but I just want to give you the overall perspective of where we were before this initiative. And so we started with what I would call this kind of blue sky vision that I described before. But really what we were doing is what I would call grassroots action. So these are a grass growing these interlocking roots. And these interlocking roots were happening at two kind of scales. The first, on the left-hand side, was voluntary and supported curriculum development with individual faculty. So myself and the TA and graduate student who was helping me extensively on this work, Xander Huggins, would meet with individual faculty member about their individual courses and say, how could this be useful for you? And how can we help you build content, and can we build some of that content? That was the left kind of wheel. And then the right wheel is developing program learning objectives and mapping mapping the entire program with the department. I'm going to describe both of these elements, but they're interlocking and iterative as we move through this. So the first piece was our pitch to individuals. And I said to individual colleagues, you give me an hour of your time to discuss how this could benefit your course and how this course might fit in with this initiative. And we'll give you back a lesson plan or possibly with a learning objective or activity to description of content and maybe something about assessment. So there was a real kind of practical exchange here where we were developing content that helped support individual faculty members and their courses. So we did this in courses that I taught. So this is our courses across 4 different terms and 4 different years of our program. So I teach Civi 340. This is Sustainable Water Resources, and we develop content and activities for this course about environmental racism, how it affects water resources, activities about how this is applied in British Columbia around large dams, such as the Site C Dam in northern BC. In other courses, we worked on content for the actual lectures, as well as honing assignments, term projects. This was a class 310 taught by another instructor, and we have these for a whole series of different courses. And collectively, what we started developing was what we called a menu of resources to integrate into courses across our curriculum. So about sustainability, about environmental justice, and anti-racism. And these are both activities, learning tools, lectures, etc. And then at the same time, we were developing program level learning objectives. So these are our 3 learning objectives. The first is around knowledge, so identifying how sustainability challenges and environmental racism interrelate, how these connect, and how they relate to civil engineering. The second learning objective for our whole program is about the design process, because we are the key part of engineering. So learning how to incorporate sustainability, equity, and environmental justice into the design process. And finally, the third is more about this professional and personal practices and how to integrate sustainability and EDI into those. So those are our overall learning objectives for our program. And we've now been mapping these across the 4 years of our program to see how they can build on one another and support the courses and learning of students from earlier years in the program. Now where we're at is to try to link this content explicitly with our engineering accreditation. So this is a very kind of text-heavy slide, and I'm not going to go through all the details. Again, I just want to show you some of our process of what we're doing in this part of the project. So again, we have this table of our 4 different years of our classes through 8 different terms. And on the left-hand side, we have 4, 9, and 10 are 3 of what are called graduate attributes. So these are what we want our undergraduate students to be graduating with, the skills that we want our undergrad students to be graduating with as part of our proving that we are an accredited undergrad program. So in this initiative, we've linked with graduate attribute number 4. This is about design, so sustainable design and social aspects of design. And graduate attribute 9 about the impact of engineering on society and environment. And graduate attribute 10 about ethics and equity, around equity, environmental justice, and racism and decolonization. And so for each of these graduate attributes, we have linked that with individual courses and individual content in each of those courses. And that's kind of color coded in the reds, blues, and greens in this table. So this will be a really useful way to show students the importance of these skills for themselves as professionals and to simplify our accreditation process. The last thing that we're starting to do, and we have been doing throughout this project, and I'll just ask Courtney to share the resources now in chat. So everyone has these 4 resources, but we're developing a website. This is a very preliminary website, so don't get too, all right, we'd love feedback, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's very much in process. Our audiences here are both our students in our program to explain all this process and how it is important and useful for them, as well as share these resources that we've developed with instructors around the world. So there's 2 audiences for this website. We're also writing a kind of pedagogic article about this process to be submitted to the Journal of Engineering Education. We've been writing posts for a blog that I'm part of called the Water Underground blog. So this is one example post, how to add environmental justice to your groundwater class. And we're actually sharing all of this content around water resources, and we will more broadly on the website for all of these resources already on a platform that's very active in my field for sharing hydrologic data, but in this case, we're also sharing water teaching data. So this is a quasi HydroShare, and I have all my teaching resources from my 2 core undergrad program classes. And these have all been downloaded hundreds of times from people around the world. The last part of our sharing broadly is talks like this. So we gave Thomas Froese and I gave, and moderated by Xander Huggins, gave a rather cheeky presentation called Between Two Ferns. And at Let's Talk Teaching at the beginning of this initiative, and we look forward to sharing in other ways on campus and beyond campus. With that, thank you, and I hope we have some time for questions and conversation with all the panelists.